I'd say the core essence of what's required in a subnet is how do you validate it? If you can't validate it, miners will feed you not what you want and they'll get rewarded for it. So you need to think of how you're going to validate it in usually a programmatic approach that allows you to have a lot of scale of miner outputs and you able to determine, is this legit? Is this what I want? Like, is this miner actually providing me compute? Are they providing me a real lead? Are they, actually committing to a repo and improving the code on that repo? If you're able to capture that aspect, the rest comes naturally.
A good example of this is Leadpoet, right? Like if we were to try and compete with an Apollo or ZoomInfo or something like that, they already have hundreds of millions of leads in their database. And in order for us to reach that point, leveraging the miner network that we have, in order for all of them to leverage the compute, the models that they have on their end, to source 50,000 leads a day per different mining, per 5, 10 UIDs, for example, right? This is just an example out there. And then we just aggregate all of those results and then we store it in our DB. We're able to get to that level so much quicker than if we were doing it by ourselves. Same thing with Shoots. They're aggregating compute from so many different miners to compete with some of the larger incumbents in the space.
Our North Star in building this subnet is data quality. And this is just part of just ensuring that we're ensuring the data coming in is good, but also on the way out, because any funnel is only as strong as what you put in at the top. If you put in bad data, even if you refine it and do research, you're going to, not actually be reaching out to legitimate emails or people that are, in that relevant market. So yeah, that's why we focus so much on the quality of the leads.
This is incredible. I cannot believe that we can have miners essentially do all of this intelligent work for us. They're compensated through the alpha token that the subnet gives them. And then we are able to take that product that miners give us, validate it through the validators, and then actually provide it to the client for a much lower cost than what we're currently doing right now. And just that whole business model that Bittensor actually allows is incredible in my opinion and what got me into it.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast. Today, we're joined by Pranav and Gavin, co-founders of Leadpoet Subnet 71. They share their journey from meeting at NASDAQ and discovering Bittensor to launching a subnet for high-quality lead generation, scaling from 0 to 1.1 million validated leads in the first few months, the upcoming agent competition for qualification and automated outreach, partnerships across the ecosystem, along with inclusion in Nvidia's Inception program and DSV Incubation. Now, back to Pranav and Gavin with the 79th Ventura Labs podcast.
Okay, so Pranav and Gavin of Subnet 71, Leadpoet. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm talking to the co-founders of Leadpoet here. So let's jump right in. You guys have over 1 million leads sourced, 1.1 million leads as of now. Talk me through what this means, what this subnet does. Why is this number significant?
Totally. Yeah, it's been definitely a great journey these past 2 months, coming from 0 leads to now in the 7 figures. Initially, we were pulling in about 500 leads a day. Now we're up to 50,000. But yeah, the general purpose of why are we doing this is we're building up a large inventory of leads. So when our users have demand for this commodity we're producing from the subnet, they can tap into a wide database and our agent will surface the leads that have the highest intent for what they're actually selling.
Let's take a step back from this 1.1 million number. What is the basis for this subnet Leadpoet? I know a lot of development time went in before actually launching this. I met you guys at Endgame last year, a few months before the subnet launched, and you were already telling me about this idea and exactly how it was going to work and everything. So what is Leadpoet? What was the reason for making the Leadpoet subnet?
Oh man. Okay, so I'm gonna maybe start this off with a story if you have a bit of time. So me and Gavin, we met at NASDAQ beforehand. And while we were over there, we started to talk about crypto. I was launching something called Bitcoin options at that point of time. And I was trying to learn more about crypto. And I met Gavin over there because a lot of people directed me towards Gavin while I was there, telling me that if you're going to get into crypto, you need to talk to Gavin because he's the crypto wizard within the firm. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go and talk to him. And he told me about various different types of crypto. He told me about Bittensor in specific. And as somebody who has been a strong proponent of open source development since I was probably 16, 17 years old, I found Bittensor fascinating. I did a bit of due diligence, and then me and Gavin got together the next few days and started to brainstorm the best ideas we could possibly have to build a subnet on Bittensor. And the number one thing that we both landed on was Leadpoet, and specifically the pain point of lead generation. Me and Gavin have had prior startups in the past. We know how painful lead generation can be. If you use current incumbents out there like an Apollo, a ListKit, a ZoomInfo, you'll realize that when you reach out to leads that they provide to you, 60 to 70% of the time, you're going to receive an automated response back from those leads saying that this inbox is being deactivated due to an influx of spam emails. So the current lead providers are incredibly painful to use because they keep providing you the same leads over and over again. And a lot of those leads are expired. And we knew that we could completely change that up if we created Leadpoet, which would leverage Bittensor to source highly qualified, double validated leads, which is how the subnet currently works right now, to make sure that the leads are all high intent, which means that those leads actually are in market to buy a product from the customer. And then number two, they're validated. So the contact method is checked, making sure that the email inboxes, the LinkedIn, and any other contact methods that we added in the future are validated so that the person who's actually using those to contact them will actually get a response. And it's not something like where it's spam, right? Their email just goes directly into the spam box and they never receive a response because of that reason. And since then, we started off probably going to so many different events. In March, we went to Endgame, like you mentioned. We went to DNA. We went to a few others as well. And we've been trying to get a subnet since then because we had that stronger conviction in this idea. And then come in October, we were incubated by DSV. We got the subnet and we've been building ever since. And here we are doing this podcast with you.
All right, Crypto Wizard, how'd you find Bittensor?
Yeah. So in terms of how I came across Bittensor, I personally found crypto for myself in the 2020, as many did. Got involved with Bitcoin. Then shortly after, Helium, a project focused on creating this DePIN network with LoRaWAN. Now it's 5G, but I was setting up a bunch of those hotspots mining, and I just found it very compelling that people could be earning this incentive to actually be building something that has real world value. And Bittensor is kind of the next evolution of that. And why I got attracted to it was I'd been following it when it just had one incentive, but as they expanded to the subnets and having multiple incentives and the ability to customize incentives, that showed me that this was kind of the next frontier in terms of a blockchain. Looks like we lost
Looks
Pranav
like
here.
we lost Pranav, yeah.
but regardless, the ability to customize those incentives was really compelling, and seeing all the different projects and the ability they were able to channel compute, channel storage, just made me really attracted to the project. And I've been an investor since 2023 in Bittensor.
2023 precedes a lot of probably current subnet owners in terms of investment into Bittensor. And you said you got here before subnets were even a thing. There was just one net. How did you build that conviction when subnets weren't even here yet? And how has your conviction from then to now changed over time? Yeah. So actually, I invested in 2024. I found the project in 2023 and was following it. And the subnets is what really triggered my interest to invest, because the ability to customize the incentives, to have multiple projects. When it was just one network, it was interesting, but it was similar to many crypto projects where they're incentivizing one specific task. But when we launched the subnets, I saw it as like a layer one for any application where you're able to define the incentive, define how you validate it, and channel these digital commodities in the most effective manner. Pranav, what was your first impression when the Crypto Wizard started talking about Bittensor to you?
My first impression was, this sounds really interesting. I've never really, it was at that point of time, 2024, never really gone into like decentralized AI applications before. I understood decentralized apps, I understood AI as a whole, but I never really combined the two. So when he first talked about it, I'm like, that's fascinating. I can't believe this is the first time I'm hearing about Bittensor. So I go back and I do some due diligence, and I'm like, I read the white paper, and I was absolutely fascinated. I was like, this is such an interesting application. I described it to a few of my friends who are founders as well, and they were like, that's incredible. Like if my company doesn't do that well, if I exit my company, the next thing I'm going to build is going to be on Bittensor. It just seemed like there was massive information gap, because anybody I talked to Bittensor about, once Gavin told me about it, they instantly had like a light bulb moment. Like, this is incredible. I cannot believe that we could have miners essentially do all of this intelligent work for us. They're compensated through the alpha token that the subnet gives them. And then we are able to take that product that miners give us, validate it through the validators, and then actually provide it to the client for a much lower cost than what we're currently doing right now. And just that whole business model that Bittensor actually allows is incredible in my opinion, and what got me into it.
You guys go to a lot of events, as you've said, and I assume you talk to a lot of people that don't know what Bittensor is yet. So when explaining what your subnet does, how do you explain Bittensor enough so they can understand what your subnet does?
Yeah. So funnily enough, in lead generation, there is a concept of contributors that provide data. So it's kind of a cheat code to explain this. So we explain it as we have contributors around the world, providing us data, and we reward them with that data. And then as we roll out our agent tool competition in the coming weeks, or actually this coming weekend, that would be also tapping into contributors around the world to compete to develop the best model. So I think when you say contributors, people understand it a lot better than obviously miners. People are like, what does that mean? Are they getting down in the shafts and pulling up gold, or are they just running, or even if you know about miners, you think about Bitcoin, they run one type of code continuously. It's not like they're optimizing that. Obviously they are through the hardware, but the software is pretty stagnant. So I think the best way is just through that contributor lens. And then also, if they ask more questions and want to get deeper, you can mention that they're competing. And the ones that are able to outcompete and provide more data or better models, they're going to earn a larger, portion of the pie. But generally, when I've put it through that contributor lens, a lot of people understand it quite quickly.
And one of the most elegant examples of this, and we've used this example before, both me and Gavin, is ImageNet. It's something that happened even well before Bittensor came around. And ImageNet was essentially this I'll call open source competition. Not really open source, but it was the first of its kind. And it essentially had researchers from across the globe compete on a public data set and then try and figure out ways to recognize images using their models to the best of their ability using this public data set. And they created a leaderboard from which of the models these researchers were publishing were actually doing the best. And each of these researchers were creating models that were competing with the next researcher. And the results that came out of the ImageNet competition were so incredible that it beat all other image recognition benchmarks at that point of time. It blew it out of the water. And it kind of illustrated to the entire planet exactly how strong open source competition can be. And Bittensor builds on that. And when we communicate it to other people, we kind of communicate that the power open source competition and global competition can provide to a specific industry or specific source of intelligence is absolutely incredible. It can change the game and it can make it that much better. And that's what Bittensor provides. And each of the subnets define what that source of intelligence is that we're trying to improve. And for us, it's lead generation. But for Bitmine, it could be deepfakes. For any other subnet out there, it could be a completely different thing. And that's what makes Bittensor so fascinating.
In terms of your specific competition, Leadpoet, what is the design here? What are the miners rewarded for?
Yeah.
Yep. Do you want to go ahead, Gavin, or do you want me to take it?
You can take it.
Sure. So right now, this is before we release the agent competition that Gavin was mentioning previously. They're rewarded for sourcing highly qualified quality leads. So this could be a lead with a valid email, a valid LinkedIn, a valid company LinkedIn, a valid location, and they're providing us all these different, a valid role, like all of these different details that we validate on our end, that validators validate on their end, right? In order to make sure that these leads, the lead quality details are all perfect before it enters the database. And only if the lead quality that the miner has provided us are up to our standards, do we actually give them the incentive associated with that lead. If miners are providing us bad leads with certain bad data, they don't receive any incentive. It doesn't enter our lead pool or our lead inventory, as we like to call it, and they don't get rewards.
So you qualify a lead based off if they have a LinkedIn with a location, company, and email?
Yeah, so that's how we validate that the lead is legitimate and that the data is high quality. But the way we actually qualify a lead based on a user's request is through this, agent that we're developing right now through this competition that's going to be launching shortly, which will be based on the user's request, dynamically looking at the database and surfacing the leads that have the highest demand, whether that's through social signals, whether the company has reached some milestones, which trigger interest in the type of product the user is selling. We surface those leads, and that's what resembles the qualified nature of the leads we're giving to these end users.
So give me a specific example here.
Totally. So a good example is recently one of our clients, they're a private equity firm, and they're focused on both buy side and sell side, and they gave us the task, the ideal customer of these cybersecurity firms that made cybersecurity more medium to small size firms that are either interested in selling their firm or interested in potentially acquiring another cybersecurity firm. So what the agent does is based on that criteria, there's kind of three initial attributes. You know that it's cybersecurity, you know that you're wanting to speak to the owner, and you know that the company size fits in this range. They also had a country and state. They only wanted US, specifically in a certain region in the US. So that's the first criteria to say, are these leads in the target market or not? But we go a step further and say, looking at those leads, do they actually have intent to sell their company? Has the person worked there 30, 40 years? Are they reaching a point where, okay, yeah, you've worked there 30, 40 years. You have a higher intent to sell than someone that started a new cybersecurity firm last year. So that would be someone that has intent to sell. On the other side, we also surfaced some leads that had intent to buy. They've already acquired a cybersecurity firm in the past years. If they've done that, they clearly have a model to be growing their firm, and they may be interested in another acquisition. So that kind of shows two different ideal customers under one target market that user had. And they came back and saying wow, these are really interesting intent signals you provided. I wouldn't have even thought of some of these being intent signals, but this has been really helpful. And, we're going to be a continuing user of the platform, when we have our full platform launch in next month. Currently, we're doing a more white glove beta for these early users just to give them a taste of the data quality. And so far we've had, very positive feedback all around.
How are you guys doing the validation here for the intent signals? Is it all going to be based off LinkedIn data, or will there be other sources?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So right now we validate when we're qualifying a lead and we're checking whether this lead is the right fit for a specific client and what they requested for. We're checking whether this lead is within the right ICP. For example, if that client requested for cybersecurity companies, we do not want to give them a lead which maybe is showing intent, but is in a completely separate industry, like in agriculture. Right? We want to make sure it fits the ICP that they've defined. Number two, we also check whether or not this person has a decision-making ability. So they're not like a lower level analyst who maybe has no influence on whether or not that firm buys the product that the client is providing. We make sure that they actually have the ability to make that decision. And then finally, the most important part, and what you just asked about, is the actual intent signal. This could be something as simple as a social media post from that client. It doesn't need to be specific from LinkedIn. It could be specific on X. It could be other social medias, etc., that we verify using our own set of APIs, via Scraping Dog, other APIs, etc., to actually check whether the content of that social media post, that the minor linked, which says that this person is in market for the product that this client is selling, is legit. So it's a real social media post from that specific company or specific lead. It's not it won 404 error out saying that it's a non-existent social media post. Then number two, they'll actually check the content of that social media post. For example, if the client is somebody who's selling a CRM, is a social media post saying that this person actually is looking to buy a CRM? Maybe their old CRM provider was not good and they want to switch from that, right? That's a very clear intent signal that we can derive from that social media post, whether it's LinkedIn, X, or so on, and say, okay, this is a good lead. It fits the ICP criteria. It fits the decision-making criteria. We should provide it to the client. That's the entire process of how it works from top to bottom.
And on top of social signals, also looking at PR, company filings, really any data that we can pull up to find the intent. But social media is going to be a great one to show, some of those intent signals as well.
And one of the other things to build on that is like a Series A round or like a seed round, right? Like if a company has recently raised a Series A round and they've maybe said in that round that they're looking to hire, maybe a recruiting company is a good person to be connected with that company, right? Because they want to spend a lot of that money on hiring. A recruiting agency may do very well connecting with that company. There are several examples that we could use to actually signal intent, but social media is a primary example of that.
How are you creating these maps for these different companies of this LinkedIn and this X and this Series A? These are all the same company. How do you validate that?
Yeah. So when it comes to LinkedIn, for example, each company is going to have a specific URL pattern that we save in our database. So if there's a specific company, we'll call it Infosys, or we'll, for example sake, let's just call it Atlassian, right? It's a company and it has a specific company on LinkedIn and a specific URL around that company. Then if it has a post on LinkedIn from that company in specific, we can easily attach it to that specific company LinkedIn. This is just on the tech end because the URL pattern is going to be the same. If it's on the profile end, so the person who actually works there, the profile pattern, so the actual URL pattern of the profile is going to be the exact same of the actual profile that person has on LinkedIn. So the URL pattern for the profile is going to match the URL pattern that's used for the post from that person as well. So those are a few ways that we can validate the posts. When it comes to Series A funding rounds, etc., we'll check for reputable business sources such as a Forbes, for example, or a New York Times, for example. And a lot of times you'll also find the funding information on the company LinkedIn directly. They'll post about the funding round, right? Like it's pretty natural for a company to post about the new funding round that they just had. And that's again verifiable just from the URL pattern from the company LinkedIn. We can map that to the post as well and see if the URL pattern matches.
How would you map a LinkedIn account to an X account?
Yeah, so on the site, most companies, they have their socials linked there. So you can kind of consider that a source of truth where the X linked on their website is their actual X. Obviously if a company's hacked and someone takes control of the socials, there is an edge case there. But yeah, we're validating that all these are, connected, and that's kind of in a company profile. This is the company, this is the industry, this is the size, headquarter location, this is the X, this is the LinkedIn, just validating all of those, different socials. So you have as you're saying, a source of truth there, which is, obviously in Bittensor, if you don't have a source of truth, the miners will tell you that they're telling you the truth when they just made up an X called Atlassian X. And this is definitely Atlassian's X. And it's like, obviously not the real one. So, we've definitely considered that just to ensure that all these signals are legitimate, that these models are surfacing. And also, since this is an open competition, we can actually look in the code and see, is it actually pinging data universe to actually get this data? Like, what's the X count coming back? Like, how is it structured? Is it structured in a way to, just ask an LLM to produce saying this is the best lead ever, and this guy definitely wants to buy your stuff, and it's fully synthetic and it's not based on a source of truth.
And at the current moment, the way the system works is you're just having miners get as many leads as possible, which are LinkedIn accounts with a location, company, and email, or is it they have to fit a specific criteria?
Yeah, it's a broad spectrum. We accept any lead that is legitimate on all the data fields, but we do have some extra incentive on kind of ideal leads that we want in our database. A lot of startups, some specific target markets that some of our early users have requested. We've also added some extra incentive there. So there is some flexibility, but any lead we will accept and give some reward for. But if you're hitting the target leads that we really want, you'll get extra incentive as a miner, and miners can get leads however they are able to intelligently build their systems, and we accept it if it meets all the criteria.
And in terms of double validation, Pranav used a term earlier. He said we double validate leads. What exactly do you mean by this?
This is a great question, and it's the crux with a lot of issues with some of the other lead sourcing mechanisms out there, like an Apollo or ZoomInfo. What they do is they'll validate maybe the email and usually not the LinkedIn, but ZoomInfo does validate the LinkedIn as well before it enters their database. And they'll validate it maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But people's roles change, people's emails change, people's LinkedIn changes, right? Like even the actual profile link itself can change. And when you don't double validate the lead, if you validate it only when it enters your database, but you provide it to a client 3 months, a year later, that lead could be completely stale. So you've only single validated it because you want to save costs, but you've now given a lead that's now going to hurt your client because they're going to send an email. They're going to construct a massive personalized email for the specific client, and it's just going to go into a void, right? They're not going to respond because that email is no longer legit. So double validation is the crux of lead generation because the lead that's given to the client, it needs to be validated at the point it's given to the client to make sure that the client is getting a lead that is fresh. It's not something that's stale, that's been validated 3 months ago and is no longer legit. And that's the most important thing that we make sure we do.
Yeah, and to build off of like what Pranav's saying is like our North Star in building this subnet is data quality, and this is just part of just ensuring that we're ensuring the data coming in is good, but also on the way out. Because any funnel is only as strong as what you put in at the top. If you put in bad data, even if you refine it and do research, you're going to, not actually be reaching out to legitimate emails or people that are, in that relevant market. So yeah, that's why we focus so much on the quality of the leads.
How do you determine if a lead is still relevant? What is the process?
So yeah, that comes into the qualification agent. So we have the database, we have the leads, we know what industry they are, what role they're in, but the agent will dynamically, based on the user's request, pretty much determine if the leads are relevant or not to that user. Because just an industry match, just a role match, may not be good. Like let's say you're trying to sell a CRM, but a company just announced a partnership with Salesforce or something. Like they're not likely going to be in the market for a new CRM right now. So it's not just looking at the criteria; it's looking at the intent. Because if someone is, or they just acquired a company last week, they may not be looking to acquire a company, in the coming months. So it's about combining the criteria of the lead with also the intent signal, which allows us to see who may look good on paper, but is actually not a relevant contact to reach out to.
And just to give a very simple example of that, say a lead comes in 2 months ago and we check its email, we ping the SMTP servers via an API, we check whether the email is legit. Then the next thing we do is we check whether the LinkedIn is legit, the company LinkedIn is legit, and the role that person is working at is legit. They're currently working at that role. It's not a prior role, right? But then 2 months down the line, or right before we provide that same lead to the client, the qualification agent needs to check all of those details again. Needs to check, is this email legit? Is this LinkedIn legit? Is the company LinkedIn legit? And then is this person actually working at the same role they were working at 2 months ago? It could have changed. They could have moved roles. They could have moved jobs. And then that lead may not be relevant, may not even be in the same industry as what the client is looking for anymore. So that's the reason that double validation is a crux. And that's the process of how we go about validating each of those fields.
Have you guys ran into any issues with the API for checking if the email is valid? And then you send the email and it still gets bounced because they have some spam filter?
No. So the way that these APIs work is they pretty much test that exact thing to ensure that this email is valid and accepting emails. And it's a fairly commoditized service to be able to check that. So yeah, we haven't run into any issues with that.
And one more point to add to that is a lot of other incumbents will allow both catch-all and email OKs. So a lot of the bounces can happen from catch-all emails because a catch-all email is essentially all of the emails you send to a specific domain, they get kind of aggregated into one inbox, right? And a lot of times those emails can lead to a higher bounce rate than the email OK or even a higher spam rate. It's just going directly into the spam account for that email. What we do is we do not allow any catch-alls into the database. We only allow for email OKs or email valids. So that in and of itself ensures a much higher data quality when it comes to the emails you're emailing versus other incumbents, which allow both catch-alls and email OKs.
Okay. A recent announcement you guys had was you are now part of the Nvidia Inception program. What does this mean for you guys? What does this change in your trajectory of Leadpoet?
Totally. Yeah, no, we were quite excited to see that we were accepted to the program. What that really means is they provide a bunch of AI startups specifically, with a bunch of resources. Includes compute, other discounted rates for other services. It also provides a pipeline for our product to others in the program where they can directly access it through Nvidia's platform. And then the third aspect, which is also very important, is access to an investor network that can tap directly into these AI startups that are in this program.
Does this program require you to give up some portion of equity or
No.
some investment from them?
No. So yeah, it's more of just a resource program, and obviously getting us in the pipeline to be able to more easily access NVIDIA services, easier access to NVIDIA GPUs and other products that they have as well. But yeah, it luckily doesn't require equity or alpha or anything that we need to give them.
But and to be quite honest, like the investor network and the overall ecosystem and access to other founders within the AI space are phenomenal in and of itself. But since we are a startup that we're an AI startup and we operate on a lot of like AWS, and costs associated around that, having this partnership actually helps definitely tame those costs for us as a business, so we can focus a lot of that money into other things such as hiring, marketing, selling the product, right? Like all of those are important things that we want to do on this business, and we want to bring that revenue back into the ecosystem, the Bittensor ecosystem. So it's a phenomenal partnership for that, right? Because it's allowed us to save a lot on our tech costs and allocate a lot of that money into other things that we know are very important.
On the note of partnerships, and we lost Pranav again.
At least it was right after he finished his sentence.
Yeah, it was. That was perfect timing. Partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
I went through your X today, and these were all the partnerships I had saw. If I missed any, let me know. If any aren't valid anymore, let me know, of course. Bitsec, Metanova, Shoots, Video, Yanez, Rezi, Bittrex, Liam, Zeus, Score. I think you guys now take the title for most partnerships.
I think we're second.
To fill you in, I listed the partnerships I saw of you guys. What do these partnerships entail?
Yeah, totally. I think we're still second to Shoot. Someone tagged me in some posts, and there is actually a leaderboard of partnerships, and we were second. I think we're approaching. We're definitely close there. But yeah, what it means is it's been a real great testing ground for our data quality ahead of starting now. We have some paid users that are actually paying and getting some of the leads and giving us additional feedback. But it was a great training ground to give initial leads. Get more ideas from the users, what they'd like to see in the leads, what different fields, and yeah, it's been great to also just help other subnets in the ecosystem, give them help on their sales. But it doesn't really end here in terms of the partnership. It's just been an initial training ground with them, but they'll be getting priority access to our products, including the qualification product. Then as we approach towards the end of the first quarter, we're also going to be doing some automated outreach, and we want to be providing them to these users first, and really helping Bittensor as a whole go to market and through our specific partners. But any real subnet we're glad to speak with and help them in really however we can, because there's so many, back to the term, wizards in Bittensor that are very technically skilled and may just have not dealt with go-to-market or sales before, or maybe they've been ancillary to it. But this will really automate a lot of that painful process that takes a lot of training to know how to qualify a lead, how to do outreach that actually is effective. And it just speeds it up so they can just hop on a meeting and actually sell a product to someone that's interested in that product already, because there's been that qualification, there's been an email describing the product, and they've responded to that call to action. So yeah, our plan of helping Bittensor continue to grow is just at the beginning, as we're approaching the platform launch, which will give us way more scale in terms of our ability to provide sales automation.
What were some of these startups you guys did before Bittensor that made you so passionate about this cold outreach?
Yeah. So It's a great question. I previously owned a startup called Athira.ai, now discontinued. And that startup was something that I was able to scale alongside my team to 6,000 B2B partners. And the way I went about doing that is creating these list of long lead lists, essentially. And it took me a lot of time to create them. I was using Apollo, ZoomInfo, and so on. And the whole process was so incredibly painful that I realized that there needs to be an alternative to it, because what I was doing was I was going through what Apollo provided me manually, sifting through thousands and thousands of leads, then identifying the top 500 out of those thousands of leads which actually have intent of buying the product that I was selling, right? Then I would create a list of those 500 or 600 leads, and then I'd send them all emails, and then 300 of them would bounce immediately. So I just wasted 300 time spent on 300 leads validating their intent, only to find out that the contact method that was given to me was not double validated by Apollo. And now that was all just time I spent down the drain. And it just was, I just know that I could have scaled that business to well above 10,000 or even 12,000 B2B partners if I had the right data provided to me and I had the right service. And I talked to so many other agencies that I was working with at the time, other businesses, because I was selling B2B, about the same problem that they were having, right? When they were trying to find customers for their business. And every single time they're like, we don't use Apollo because we like it. We don't use ZoomInfo because we like it. We use it because we absolutely have to. There's no other alternatives. The industry is saturated with old generation tech, and there's no AI that's actually being used to find intent for each of these leads. And I was like, light bulb moment, right? Like, that's the next business. That's what we need to create. And then I talked to Gavin, who had sourced leads before for a hedge fund. He had a previous Helium startup as well. So he understood the pain point. And then when we started getting talk about it, we started talking about Bittensor as kind of the foundation where we'd be building this business. And we both just had a light bulb moment. And we never, like, if you think about it, from March to October, we never once switched our idea or thought about switching our idea, even though we didn't have a subnet. We had that much conviction in the idea and we knew it would work because it's a pain point that we struggle with so dearly. And then when we got that subnet, everything was just smooth sailing from there.
And in terms of your roadmap, because you guys have been on this idea now for essentially a year, what does the roadmap look like? What is the future of Leadpoet?
Yeah. So I think what Gavin said previously is a great point to build on, where within Bittensor in specific, there's so many wizards, as you'd like to call them, right? Like incredibly intelligent tech folks, engineers, etc. But a lot of them may not really have the experience when it comes to sales, which is why our golden eggs down the line is automating the entire sales process, not just providing you with high intent lead. That's the very valuable part and the most important part of the sales funnel. But we want to automate that entire sales funnel. So finding those leads with the highest intent of buying scores product, shoots product, so on, right? And then reaching out to them via email, via LinkedIn, having the miners actually go through that entire process of warming up emails to make sure that the emails they send are deliverable. Those emails actually landing in the inboxes of those high intent leads. And then those leads actually booking a call on the calendar of the VP of sales and shoots, of the CEO of Score, right? And then they take that sales call. So all you need to do is just talk about the product that you spend so much time building and you love to build, right? Like as an engineer, as a tech person at Bittensor, you're telling people about that, you're selling it, but the actual process of people who are interested in your product, actually booking a sales call with you in your calendar is completely automated. And that's the golden egg that we will reach in the next few months. But we're going to start off by making sure the top of the funnel, the data quality is absolutely pristine before we move on to automating the next thing.
So the end goal here is setting meetings that people actually show up to.
Yeah, I mean, you can almost think about it like Quadbot for sales. So we've seen, all these autonomous bots be able to do incredible things, but we're just giving them not the high quality data that is very rare and hard to put together and aggregate and have all these standard fields and all this data. We're giving them that as well as the tools to actually qualify, do the research around those leads, and then do the outreach as well. So yeah, just automating all this painful part, which is, we've spoken to sales reps where 80% of their time is spent on the outreach and the qualification of the people they decide to reach out to. If we can automate that, salespeople, they can spend all their time actually selling, and they don't need to worry about the manual, tedious process that goes into those other two tasks.
In terms of usage of your product, I saw a clip of you guys talking about how it will be burn alpha token to get leads. What is the usage of Leadpoet going to look like for people that want to get leads?
Yeah. So what that aspect is in order for anyone to access the subnet, leadpoet.com included, as a user of the subnet, you need to burn alpha to almost get API credits for the subnet to be able to request leads. But we don't want that to be friction for users. So users are going to come to leadpoet.com, use their credit card, get leads as they request, and leadpoet.com, as a user of the subnet, will have to be burning alpha to actually get those leads from the subnet. But a cool part of our architecture is we're really producing leads as a commodity at the subnet level. So anyone, if they want to, white label that business, will be able to, through, obviously a little bit more technical skill set of automating the burning of alpha to get credits. And, all that code that we produce on our subnet, it'll be open source of how to create that mechanism. So someone else will easily be able to replicate that on their own platform and also tap into this commodity of leads.
What do you anticipate? I know you guys aren't there yet, but this pricing per se of burn one alpha, get X amount of leads.
Yeah. So we anticipate that it'll be, around, let's say 3 cents, at least at the beginning, because we want a low cost so we can get a lot of distribution. And as the quality is more renowned, as all of those services we're selling on top, qualification, outreach, as that is more refined towards, let's say the latter half of this year, or even earlier this year, we can look to start increasing that. But, as mentioned, we want to reduce friction as much as possible. The data of the usage is more important in these early days, the feedback, than a smaller amount of, actual demand through the alpha burn. But yeah, so a low rate, but looking to increase that over time as the quality has become established.
And I don't feel this podcast would be done justice if I didn't ask you about DSV Fund in your incubation with them. I believe you're the first subnet to be incubated by DSV Fund. How did that process look like? How'd that go? How is it working with Siam and Mark?
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure. I actually, randomly cold DM'd Siam, and I think it was June, just being like, hey, I saw you're in Bittensor, I'm thinking of this idea, would love to chat. And ever since then, me, Pranav, Mark, Siam have been hopping on monthly calls, or even at a faster cadence as we approached, October when we pulled the trigger, but discussing the idea, going through traction, discussing, all our different plans around it. And towards late September, they came to us and they're like, do you just want us to get you a slot? Like, we've never done this before, but we've spoken with you guys so much. We like your idea. They're both very familiar with sales and the pain point that we're specifically solving. So we said, yeah, we'd love to. Like, we liked you guys a lot, not only as business partners, but as people. So we would love to, get in a real incubation with them. And then since then, obviously they provided the slot. They provided some initial runway capital that's allowed us to, cover a lot of our initial API costs. We recently brought an engineer onto the team. We're looking to, bring some sales folks onto the team as we approach the platform launch in February. And yeah, it's been great. And they're really already starting to feed us some potential sales. And, they have a huge network, each of them, of people that would use this product. So that's really where we're going to have a huge unlock of value of them as an incubator for us. So yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with them.
Okay, before I wrap it up with one last question here, you have anything else you guys want to touch on for Leadpoet or Bittensor in general here that you feel I missed?
No, I think your questions were just that good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you covered
I think the one thing is, me and Pranav, we will both be, obviously, unfortunately, Exploit was canceled, but me and Pranav will still be there for those dates. There are some bumblings that, OTF may have an event there. So definitely, glad to see anyone there. Don't hesitate to also reach out if you have, sales needs and we can help you. We've had a lot of inbound from people in the community across a diverse array of markets. And we're glad to, help provide you leads. And yeah, don't hesitate to go on our site and book a call with us. We'll definitely make the time, especially for people in this community, whether you're a subnet owner or just someone that's on the side of the community, an investor, anything. We always love working with people in the ecosystem.
So my last question for today is, you guys were able to take a personal problem and map it to Bittensor and create a subnet to solve that personal problem. What advice do you have for people that have these problems that aren't solved in the greatest way and be able to take those problems and solve them with a Bittensor subnet? What advice do you have for those people?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the core essence of what's required in the subnet is how do you validate it? If you can't validate it, miners will feed you not what you want, and they'll get rewarded for it. So you need to think of how you're going to validate it in usually a programmatic approach that allows you to have a lot of scale of miner outputs, and you able to determine, is this legit? Is this what I want? Like, is this miner actually providing me compute? Are they providing me a real lead? Are they, actually committing to a repo and improving the code on that repo? If you're able to capture that aspect, the rest comes naturally. You can figure out how to assign a mission. You can figure out all these other things. But if you don't have that foundation, the rest, you're building on a weak foundation and you'll never reach your goal. So the core thing is figuring out how you're going to validate that. And, I've worked with some teams to help them ideate that and get them to a state where they're ready to launch. And, it's been really exciting to see. But that is since you don't know who you're working with here, you need to validate that work to channel, these commodities to be created.
And yeah, just to add on to that, I would say one thing is the space that I want to innovate in something where there's a high barrier to entry from centralized companies in this space? And a good example of this is Leadpoet, right? Like, if we were to try and compete with an Apollo or ZoomInfo or something like that, they already have hundreds of millions of leads in their database. And in order for us to reach that point, leveraging the miner network that we have, in order for all of them to leverage the compute, the models that they have on their end, to source 50,000 leads a day per different mining, like per 510 UIDs, for example, right? This is just an example out there. And then we just aggregate all of those results and then we store it in our DB. We're able to get to that level so much quicker than if we were doing it by ourselves. Same thing with Shoes. They're aggregating compute from so many different miners to compete with some of the larger incumbents in the space. Right? So is there a massive barrier to entry that Bittensor can help solve? And if the answer to that is yes, then there's a definite use case for that subnet if it can also be validated, the work that's being done by miners.
Pranav, Gavin, pleasure having you guys on the podcast today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Amazing to have us.